This episode is brought to you by Audible. Enjoy 30 days free of Audible Premium Plus by going to ontopofpr.com/audible.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by Review Maxer.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. Today, I'm joined by Brooke Kruger. Brooke is a seasoned executive recruiter and founder of KC Partners. She has more than 20 years of experience helping companies build high-performing leadership teams. Her expertise extends into PR and communications world, where she has successfully placed top talent in roles that shape brand narratives and corporate messaging. With a keen understanding of industry trends, she connects organizations with strategic communicators who drive engagement and reputation management. Brooke, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so today we're going to talk about communications, hiring trends, and what it takes to recruit employees in this job market, to get a job, keep a job, everything going on in the communications hiring world. Can we handle that in one episode, do you think?
I mean, we can sure try. A lot's going on right now. So
yeah. Well, I mean, we were talking before we pressed record about, the pandemic times and how that was, basically 5 years ago when we were in the early stages of the pandemic, and how the world changed then and has changed since. And employment is one of those things that has really been disrupted, it feels like holistically in 360 degrees, during this time. So for the record, we're recording this in March of 2025. And Brooke, why don't you set the stage with kind of telling us what you're currently seeing in the marketplace right now?
Absolutely. So I think what we need to do is kind of look back in the past 5 years. From fall 2020 to May 2022, it was one of the busiest hiring markets for comms professionals. In midsummer, late fall of 2022, the tech layoffs started and they just didn't stop. 2023 was a tough hiring year. 2024 was still a tough hiring year, and this is all in communications. People were unsettled about what was going to happen with the election. And so now we're here in 2025, and I can report that comms hiring is busier than it was a year ago. There were lots of stops and starts in the past couple of years, but we are now seeing steady communications hiring. That said, it's an extremely competitive market for talent. There are a lot of people looking for jobs. And so the employees definitely have the upper hand in the current market.
So when you say a lot of people looking for jobs, you're saying there's a lot of job openings that people are looking to hire candidates for.
Well, no, there are less jobs that are open right now, and there are more people that are looking. So hiring managers have the upper hand right now, and they can really focus on getting, the perfect candidate, but it's a very crowded market.
Okay. Crowded meaning lots of candidates.
Lots of candidates.
Okay.
And so what I see, I run a recruiting firm, KC Partners, and my clients come to me and say, this is exactly what we want. These are the skill sets we want. These are the skill sets they need. And they should be able to find this in this market.
So I'm seeing a lot of candidates post on social media their frustrations that companies are hiring, but they're not really hiring. They've got jobs posted, but they're not really interviewing or things like that. One, do you see that? Two, what would you say to those people?
So yes, I think a lot of jobs are not publicly listed. They are networked or hired through a recruiter like myself or through internal referrals. And I think when the jobs are posted, they are getting a massive amount of interest in there. So it's hard to get through the crowd. So I think if candidates see a job posted at a company, they should try to find an internal referral, and meaning somebody who works there who could recommend them for the job.
That sounds so old-fashioned. The same advice I was given, 30-something years ago, right?
It hasn't changed. And networking is critical in this market. Networking is critical for candidates looking for jobs, but also for hiring managers. If you're looking to hire someone for your firm, or if you're looking for your company, you want to be networking with people. And who do people think are good? Mm-hmm. Whose work do you respect?
Yeah, good. So do you sense that there's companies out there for some reason advertising positions, but not really entertaining positions?
I think I get the sense that there's people out like that. I think, it's all perception, right? People, if they have a job, they want to post it, or maybe they think they're going to have a job coming down and they kind of want to test the market to see who's going to apply.
Right.
and see the interest.
Yeah.
Headcount has been on hold for so long.
Right.
In the communications field, and people are getting excited about that, and they may not necessarily be ready.
Yeah, and we've tested and we found it's hard for us to do this well, we think, but we've put out job postings and we've tried to put in bold at the top, not currently interviewing, simply just collecting candidates so that when we're ready to interview, we've got people already in place and we're ready to go. But you still hear from people like, hey, I applied and I haven't heard anything yet. And, and so every time we've tried that, we've just walked away and said, okay, it just doesn't seem to work the way we want it to work.
Yes. I mean, I think I appreciate your transparency and honesty, and I think that should be applauded. I think there's so many people for looking for jobs, and they want to be successful. So, they're trying whatever they can to get a job. So
sure. And you can't blame them. I mean,
I cannot blame that at all. It's it's a very tough hiring market. And I'm talking to people all day long who are out of work. And, these are people who've never been out of work in their life and they're struggling to find a job. So, yeah.
I mean, you for many people, their job is a sense of purpose in their life and a calling. For most people, we depend on income to be able to survive. And when you take those things away from people and it gets frustrating, or it's been a while and they grow impatient, the emotions start to take over and the stress 100%. Is there. And
the confidence levels down. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. And it's in this job market, again, employers can have their pick of who they want to hire. And so candidates need to be fully prepared and interview well and do their research and put their best self forward.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone right now who's looking for a job, and maybe they're frustrated, maybe they're not yet frustrated, but kind of what would be some thoughts you would share with them?
Well, I think it's critical to kind of understand your skill set, what you like to do, what motivates you, and try to look for jobs that are going to appeal to those things. I think, LinkedIn is so critical. You need to have a LinkedIn profile. You need to be active on your LinkedIn profile. You need to be you don't need to be constantly posting things, but updating things and just, liking things and be an active member. Have a resume that attaches well to your LinkedIn. They're very similar. If you have something on your LinkedIn, you have it on your resume. And you need to be networking. I think for people who've been working for a long time and then are suddenly out of a job, I think it can be overwhelming. So set some structure to your day, to your week, have some guidelines or some goals. Do you have 3 conversations a week? Reach out to people. I mean, obviously, if recruiters contacted you for in the past, reconnect with them, let people know you're looking, put yourself out there. That goes a long way.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just going to step on my soapbox for just a minute, because to me as a hiring manager, I've hired hundreds of people in my career, and I'm always looking at LinkedIn first. I want to see LinkedIn before I see a resume, because LinkedIn follows a consistent format. I know how to skim it quickly. I know how to find what I'm looking for. And I feel like, and I know I'm wrong because I've seen other people, post on LinkedIn or have content on LinkedIn, but I sense that, if you're going to put on LinkedIn, there's a higher percentage that it's actually accurate and truthful, because there's the social crowd, right? So people you used to work with and things like that. Now, I will say I've had people who used to work at us who have taken a lot more credit for work than I would give them. So it still happens, right? I'm not unaware of that, but at least there's a little bit more, I would say, accountability for what you might put on LinkedIn, or at least you have to think twice about exaggerating something. But I meet entry-level professionals and college students. They're like, well, I'm not on LinkedIn. And I'm like, well, you have to be.
You have to be on LinkedIn. Yeah, absolutely.
You have to be. And I tell them, just like you said, you don't have to post every day. You don't have to comment. But when I search for you on LinkedIn, I want to be able to find you quickly.
100%.
I might have met you at an event when you're with your boss, and I don't want to make an offer in front of your boss, but I don't know how else to see you or find you ever again, right?
Exactly.
And so then I will go on LinkedIn, and I do this a lot. I'll say, hey, I saw you got this award. I saw you on this list. I saw you speak. I met you at this conference. If you're ever in the market for a job, we should talk. But I'm very clear. We don't have an opening right now, or, whatever it might be. And then just building that bridge. But if I can't find them on LinkedIn, I don't know where I'm going to find them. Instagram, that doesn't seem right to me.
No.
So, yeah.
I think LinkedIn is your professional social media. So it needs to be updated, it needs to be accurate, and you need to be on it. And I use LinkedIn always to find candidates.
Yeah.
We have people in our network and in our database, but I'm always, when I send a resume to my client, I also send their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so easy to use. Anybody can use it. You're not worried about formatting and PDF or converting it from Word to PDF and all that stuff. And I use it all the time to be like, okay, what was the name of that guy that I met at this event? He's from this city. He does this, because I'm referring him to somebody, or her to somebody.
Yes. And when you refer people, I always put their LinkedIn profile. And yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the other soapbox item for me is, if you're going to ask me to connect on LinkedIn, take a moment and explain how we met or why we're connecting.
Another pro tip.
Yeah. Other than just a random person wants to, connect with me, I'm going to ignore it. Or the person that just says, "Oh my gosh, you're so accomplished in your career. Let's connect." I'm like, okay, but who are you and why are we?
What do you want? Why? Yeah. Yes, exactly. I'm always like, know your ask.
Yeah. Because my DMs are about to blow up with your solicitations, right? As soon as I say yes. So yeah. Good. And then, you said something earlier, you kind of were recounting as we got started. I'm going to take a quick look at my notes here. And I appreciate you kind of setting the table for where we've been in the last few years. Last night I was at an economic forum and somebody mentioned, that there was, a traditional recession, but they didn't call it a recession. And it caught my eye. But, by definition, a recession used to be 2 consecutive months of reduced GDP. And we had that in, I think the person said in 2023, I think it was around June, as I recall. I looked it up last night while they were speaking, because I was seeing myself, I didn't really hear about that, but I can also show, where our business was impacted in that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that was very interesting to see. You mentioned earlier that I think you said in fall 2020, demand for, from fall 2020 to May 2023, demand 2022. Okay. Demand for PR, I'll just say resources was very high.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody was hiring. Everybody was staffing up. Everyone was bringing on agencies. They were increasing budgets. And at the end, or started summer of 2022, things started slowing down. Tech, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I have a lot of tech clients. Tech started tightening their budgets and doing massive layoffs they hadn't done for years. Yeah. And that kind of started it. I mean, the government layoffs today are what we saw the tech layoffs in 2022 and 2023.
Yeah, 100%. My theory, first of all, we saw incredible demand for PR services. The pandemic hit, a lot of companies were like, we can't do PR anymore, and And I'm like, this is when you need PR the most. Yeah, and a lot of them leaned on us to make those statements. 100%. We're still in business and business as usual, and we have these capabilities.
Oh, and then it's like pandemic, then vaccination, then return to work, like all those major decisions that affected. Their company.
And so there was a point where our business was down, and the next thing you know was at an all-time high, and demand was so high that we were able to increase our prices significantly because people couldn't find people to employ.
I could see that.
Or they couldn't find agencies to do the work, and I mean we didn't have a wait list, but we were actively staffing and struggling to keep up with demand, which was fabulous, for that season. And then, as I mentioned, we saw where the economy slowed down. My theory on the tech layoffs was always this, and tell me if feel free to tell me your opinion. But my opinion was always that these big tech companies had the ability, for lack of a better word, to hoard staff, right? And keep people and keep hiring people when there was these other shortages happening all over the world, so that they had a roster, they had a bench, and they had everything they needed. And then once that cooled off a little bit, that's when they were easily able to shed a lot of the people they hired. And my other theory is a lot of the people they hired at top dollar, right, to meet the market demands, who now didn't require to pay such a high salary. And Mike, from your view in Silicon Valley, is that accurate? Would you? What?
I would agree with those theories. I think everybody was staffing up. They were getting people. Candidates were demanding high salaries, and then when the market slowed down a little bit, they had to let go. I also think it was a complete domino effect. Once the big tech companies started laying off, every company was like, oh well, we should lay off.
Yeah.
Once one person did that, it just kept going and going and going and going.
When you look at tech companies, what do they have? They've got a lot of data. They've got a lot of analysts, and they can use that data to make informed decisions. And so sometimes you wonder if they know something we don't know yet. But my point is that, during that time, I didn't panic. I wasn't paranoid. I stayed focused on the idea that, these people were hiring and hiring and hiring just to make sure they had employees, I think. And then because they can afford to do that. These are huge corporations that, they've got more employees in one department than most big companies have, kind of thing. So that was always my working theory there. And so talk to me about, our audience is mostly brands, marketing directors and PR managers. Thinking about them, what advice would you give to them if they are actively hiring or maybe about to hire, thinking about hiring? Like, what do they need to know? What's the reality of the marketplace for employers right now?
So I think they do have the upper hand. And so when a lot of people have been waiting a long time for headcount for years, and headcount is opening up. And so when they get this headcount, they want to get it right. And they really need to look at like what is going to be the best hire that's going to support our existing team and improve and grow. So really, if you get, a lot of times people are like, oh my God, we got the headcount, let's hire immediately. But really think about how they want to grow their team and what's going to be the right role. What I am seeing a lot as a result of this, I am seeing a lot of hiring managers extend their interview process because they want more stakeholders involved. I don't necessarily think they need to do that in every case. I think when you do get the headcount out and you're ready to hire, really have your interview process, tight. Who do the candidates need to meet with? How many rounds? Is there an assignment? And so you really want to be empathetic to the candidates interviewing and really educate them on what's really going to happen. And I think that makes a better interview process overall.
Yeah, I remember getting advice from agency associations I belong to, and therefore ultimately that advice rolls downhill to our clients when we give them advice. But the advice was, hey, you might have had a really extended hiring process before, while people were hiring like crazy, right? And so you're like, now you've got to either compress that timeline or eliminate steps, whichever one you have to do to get to that. Are we at a point now where that's still important, but not as important, Brooke?
Yes, I think each company is unique. And I think you really have to look at it holistically, like who are the key stakeholders this hire really needs to meet? What does our company require of the interview process? Who do they need to meet? And again, just really tighten that up. I do not think that people should just go through an interview process and just meet a ton of people just to do it. There needs to be a strategic point in talking to each person. I love when companies say, okay, we're going to have this person meet 4 people. This person's going to focus on leadership. The next person's going to focus on culture. Give somebody something to run with. And so everybody is not having the exact same conversation. They're screening the candidates for different skill sets. And then I do think, the hiring manager should also always be the first point of contact, but they also should do a check-in before the final interview as well with whoever their boss would be.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
And so when they're meeting with we'll call them, they're having these topical interviews, should the person interviewing them be an internal or some other expert on that topic as well? I mean, that seems obvious, but I just want to...
It could, or it just, however you want to break it down. Well, each company, let's look at the values of your company and what's important and what are the themes upon every hire, and maybe break it down in that way. If there's 4 core principles, let's have everybody focus on one principle. The hiring manager is obviously going to focus on the skill set.
Right. Gone are the days when, like the Ritz-Carltons of the world and stuff like that would make you do 7 to 10 interviews.
No, those actually are very common now, and candidates are getting very frustrated because they feel like there's just always one more step, or the goalpost is changing. But from the hiring manager's perspective, again, they finally got the headcount, and they want to get it right, and they want to make sure all the stakeholders are involved. Yeah. So there's no pushback. But when you have more people interviewing, it's hard to get consensus, right? Everyone has an opinion. Right. So I like a tight process. I mean, my ideal process would be you meet with the hiring manager. The hiring manager then puts you through a panel interview, whether that's on site or through Zoom now. That's 3 people. If you, the next would be understanding work product. A lot of people are doing assignments. I'm not a huge fan of assignments that take a ton of time and energy from someone who's already, employed or looking for a job. But I am a fan of trying to understand how candidates think. And so giving them an exercise, whether they pre-plan for it or asking them a question during the interview process to help understand how they would approach a problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like you could also ask for work samples as well, or greatest hits. I love that when clients are like, hey, send me your 3 greatest hits and why you chose those. I think that really shows, okay, this is a project or a media hit or a plan that the candidate was really excited about. And then once you're through the project stage, there usually will be a final interview, whether that's the CEO, whether that's the, head of the function. And then, after that, there's references. I will say also, references are critical right now in this market. Hiring managers are putting a lot of emphasis on references. Mm-hmm. It used to be just a thing where people just passed along a couple people. Now, hiring managers are diving deep.
Good. Yeah, I think that's great. You said the 3 greatest hits. I don't use that terminology, but I borrowed that concept, 20 years ago from David Ogilvy in his book, Confessions of an Ad Man. That's something he said that he does, is he says, I only want to see 3 things from you, then they're your 3 favorites in your book, and I want you to tell me what you like about them. And he said he uses that to discern their taste and to make sure that they have, good taste in design or whatever it might be, because the things they're probably not most proud of are the ones that started out with them doing it, and then somebody messed with it, and got it to here. And now I might think this looks great, and that candidate thinks it looks terrible. So I want to see the things that they're most proud of, or the things that stand out to them in their book. And then when you talked about media coverage, what I've learned you have to ask about media coverage is, okay, this article looks great on whatever website or whatever it is, but who is your client? Because if good journalism has at least 3 sources, right? That's kind of a standard. And so how do I know who your client was in this kind of article? And candidly, what was their role in getting that piece of earned media coverage? If they sat next to the person who pitched it, I don't know how much that counts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think when you can go in and yes, it's like, oh, this is, for example, like, hey, this is, tell me your 3 greatest hits, right? They give a story. Okay, who did you work with? Who is the reporter you worked with on it? Mm-hmm. How did the story come out? Who came up with the story idea? Oh, that's interesting. How'd you guys think about that? Like, really, I think as a candidate, you come to the table, you really have to know your story. The number one skill, people always ask me, what's the number one skill for a candidate right now? It's being a good storyteller. Yeah, so you need to be able to tell your client stories or your employer stories, but you also need to be able to tell your story. What makes you tick? What makes you successful? What are your interests? What are your motivations? Like you can tell a lot about that. The other thing, I think, going back to your point about Ogilvy, a question I like to ask candidates as well is, what are 3 brands that really resonate with them and why? Mm-hmm. And they could say anything from, Starbucks to Walmart to, OpenAI, but you really get to understand why.
Yeah, that's good. As I think about those are really good questions. And I like your questions that are specific to actual work as opposed to, you show up to an interview and they're like, tell me about a time where there was friction between you and a coworker and the supervisor got involved or something. And I'm like, I don't remember those things because, I generally don't have problems at work and I'm generally, and when I do, it rolls off my back. So I'm like, I don't know how to answer that in this exact moment,
I think people in general like to talk about themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you get them on a track, we're talking about a project that they did that was exciting to them and something they felt accomplished, you can really understand what makes them tick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all about that. Like I was on the PR side for 6 years. I worked on the PR agency from 99 to 2005. I pivoted into recruiting for comms people in 2005 and started my own firm in 2009. So I have spent 20 plus years in the communications industry. Mm-hmm. And again, I understand the jobs that I'm hiring for because I worked in them or I reported to the people. And I just always want to understand people's motivations for what they want to do and why they did it. So it's important to really peel the onions back when you're interviewing and understanding, who this person is and what they're going to be excited about.
I interviewed early in my career for a position. They asked me what my favorite vegetable was. And off the cuff, I just said potato because you can cook it and prepare it many different ways. And it almost always tastes good. And immediately they said, oof, that's not the answer we're looking for. And I didn't get the job. And like to this day, I wonder if it's because I didn't say some other kind of vegetable. And what kind of question is that to just throw it?
I think that you okay. So that's interesting you say that because there's questions like this I've seen through the years. One time I had somebody ask my candidate, like, what'd you do this weekend? Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, I did a yoga class. Okay. Why is your yoga studio the best studio you've ever been to? And I think when people ask those questions, they're just trying to figure out how you process information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you could have answered it too quickly, which I would have respected. I would have respected your answer because you were decisive. So to me, I would have liked that. But
well, what they told me was potato means you're not a good fit for this job. Like that's exactly what they told me. So I'm just like
it's too vanilla of an answer.
Yeah,
like it's too basic.
I don't know. I still don't know. I think if I would have said broccoli, maybe they would have said yes.
I think everything happens for a reason, you got a very successful career. And
no regret.
If they said no because of a potato was the answer, then I don't know if that's the right fit for you.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly right. So, all right, Brooke. So thank you for sharing kind of your steps for what would be a good interviewing process. Are there just off the cuff kind of mistakes you see people making as they're doing interviews?
I see a lot of mistakes right now. I post a lot on LinkedIn as well when I try to summarize things. So from a candidate perspective, the biggest mistakes, they're not preparing. They're not available. They're not flexible. If you're interviewing for a job, you need to be available. You need to make your schedule work as much as you can. Everybody has a lot of stuff going on, but you have to show interest.
Right.
And from a hiring manager's perspective, going back to I like a clean, transparent process. This is the process. This is what is going to happen. And these are the steps. I think honesty is always the answer. And tell candidates, hey, we have 3 or 4 people in process. We're seeing people through the process. Keep everybody informed on the steps so it's a good process. What I'm hearing a lot of, which I think is terrible, is ghosting. Companies don't get back to candidates who are in the process. If they're not a fit, just let them know they are not a fit. You appreciated their time, but you will not be moving forward. You can say that in a nicer way, but ghosting is never the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Never.
And that has become a common thing because everybody's too busy. So many candidates come to me and they're like, yeah, I had all these interviews, but I never heard back. I'm like, no one said that you were part of the process. They're like, no, no one said that you weren't going to move forward. They're like, no, I just saw somebody else got hired, so I assumed it didn't. And these are people who took their time out of their day to interview.
Oh yeah. I see that anecdotally a lot from my network of people who talk about those things happening. So yeah, I completely empathize with that. I would say the only exception for us is when we don't get back to people is when they just apply to send,
that's different though. This is somebody who's had an interview. Right. A lot of companies have a form thank you for your interest. We'll get back to you. Right. Should we want to move forward? But these are people who had 2 or 3 interviews. Yeah,
absolutely. If you invite them into your organization, whether that's through a video chat like this or through, an actual on-site presentation, I think you owe them, the utmost information. Of course, maybe they don't tell you, maybe you don't tell them that they didn't get the job.
Because they said potato.
Oh, yeah, well, that too. But maybe you wait till the other person accepts your offer.
Yes,
before you
yes.
Unless they're
just
absolutely not a candidate at all, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of strategies around that,
Sure.
about that, but always, I think you always close people out of the process, and I think that's critical. And the other thing is, whether you hire this person or not, your goal as an employer and through the interview process is to have everyone have a good, positive candidate experience.
Absolutely.
You want people to leave and be like, oh my gosh, I loved everyone there. They didn't end up hiring me, but I thought it was a great place to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then they'll want to come back. They'll tell their friends. Yeah. If you're in, like us, an agency, maybe they'll work with you on the other side.
A client, or I had 2 people for an agency search last year, and one person didn't get it, and they ended up going in-house and referred or brought the agency on because they had such a positive interview experience, and they didn't even get it. Yeah. But they were like, I had such a good experience, and I think they'd be a great firm. So
we've had that same experience here, and past interns go on to get corporate jobs, and
100%.
One of our interns is a chief marketing officer with a pretty big company, and first thing she did was call me, and that was amazing, right?
I'm all about the long game. I'm not transactional. It's building relationships. It's paying it forward.
Yeah, exactly. Brooke, this has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, it's time for us to wrap up. If somebody wants to connect with you, how do they best find you?
The best way to find me is on LinkedIn under Brooke Kruger. And then my website is www.casey-partners.com.
And as we're wrapping up, give us a quick elevator summary of your business. And I'm curious how you came up with the name KC Partners.
Okay, great. Well, for KC Partners, so I am from Kansas City. Yeah. I live in San Francisco Bay Area now. I live in Marin County, just outside the city. But I'm from Kansas City, and so KC Partners is a tribute to my hometown. Go Chiefs! And how I got into the business, as I mentioned, I worked in PR on the agency side for 6 years, and I loved a lot of parts about PR. And a lot of things, the client service, the new business, the connecting with people. But I decided I wanted to pivot into recruiting and kind of found my calling. And I started KC Partners in 2009. We focus on communication search. We work with agencies, corporations, startups, and VC firms. I would say our sweet spot is pre to post IPO high growth companies. I do a lot of work in the tech sector, being from the Bay Area, but we work across all industries across the U.S.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Brooke, I'm really glad you came on today. I think you shared your smarts with our audience, which they really appreciate. And this ever-changing employment environment is never a dull moment in my experience, and excited that you could share some of that with our audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you for including me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So with that, that's another episode of your favorite podcast, I hope, On Top of PR. And our job here is to help you stay on top of PR. I think we did that by talking about employment trends and what you need to be looking for in the marketplace, whether you're in the market for a new position or if you are actively looking to increase your headcount or your team size. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you for tuning in.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.